And we're transitioning to me, hopefully. Come on, work with me. There we go. All right, close this down in the background. Drop the monitors. How's everybody? Excellent. Thanks for coming out, everybody. I thought we would do stuff that I couldn't fit in the video, but everybody didn't have any trouble reminding me that I needed to do. I love that about 5 Watt World. You guys are so shy. You're so, retiring. You find it hard to express yourselves. Yeah, not so much. First, I need to thank Phil for moderating, and of course Jason Lachlan for playing. I need to thank Phil. I was teasing Phil and Jason along the way that Phil was going to get an artist management percentage because it was Phil who thought to ask Jason if he had a Rick that he could do on this. And of course, Jason wrote a piece of music that sort of did 60s meets XTC kind of thing later, which was very cool. Jason is a monster. And the scariest thing about Jason Lachlan trivia here, is that he actually went to school for trumpet and was a good enough jazz trumpet player to play with the Sun Ra Orchestra after college for a few years. And then he also plays guitar like a monster. So that's what it is. It's nice that everybody's showing up. Everybody's got here. It's good. Chase Lopez felt the need to own right up to the fact that I outed him as a Rick collector. He sent me some nice pictures of Ricks. I want to let everybody know I caved. I totally caved, and I put up an Instagram account. Yeah, it is a hole. Instagram. It's just like an endless rabbit hole of guitars. But I went ahead and put up an account, so you can go find me at 5 Watt World on there. I think there is actually something called 5 Watt World My Ass. That's not me. I think it might be about us. I haven't gone to check it out yet. I haven't taken the time, but I'm going to do that. That's the new news. So everybody after this, or if it gets slow, if I kind of lag, jump over there and go ahead and sign up for that. Last housekeeping thing is the moderator for that pedal show and a number of other great channels, a guy from Paris named Beve, and a friend of Phil's. Phil connected me with Beve, and I connected with the guys at the pedal show that way to use a couple clips. Actually wrote to me to say that the first guy who got the "Who's Next" question right on the last stream was a guy named Pablo Crespo, Crespo. So everybody's job today is to keep an eye out for Pablo Crespo. And if he jumps into the stream, or if he's out there, Pablo, if you're out there, I owe you a t-shirt because I understand. And I went back and I watched the whole stream, as painful as that might be for me, and saw that everybody was there, and that guy got it first. So, all right. So this is the stuff that wouldn't fit in the Rick video. And people brought up in the comments, I'll need to remind everybody that I am not Zach Childs. So if you don't watch Zach Childs, my really good friend Ask Zach. Zach Childs wrote a column for Vintage Guitar Magazine for 12 or 13 years. He may still on occasion write for them, I think. He's the kind of guy who could tell you what Albert Lee's string gauges were in 1974. And then he could tell you how they changed in 1979. I'm not that guy. I'm a researcher. I started doing short histories because I love learning this stuff. And to tell you the truth, I'm working on a juniors video right now, like Gibson Les Paul Juniors, because I'm absolutely fascinated with single pickup guitars right now in my life. And actually, if you look back here, speaking of the junior video, my 2 PRS Mira Les Paul substitute may still be. They're basically, Les Paul double cuts, junior style 1958 slab double cuts. We got a top chat already. Litve, thank you, man. Thanks a lot. Anyway, so that's what I'm working on. But that's why I do these, and all this stuff isn't in my head, except it's certainly there, close to the work, and it's all right there now. And some of this stuff I did collect over time. So the first one is I have to give credit where it's due. That Perry my script editor, TCM on here, Perry actually added the bit about Pete Seeger. I had just a single line, and Perry added a few more sentences because Pete Seeger, of course, was a huge influence in the 60s on everybody. And there were all these hits, sort of the Weavers, and Pete Seeger was doing these concerts, and he wasn't playing banjo, he was playing a big 12-string. He tuned it down a half step and then often capoed it, just like the famous 12-string blues guy Leadbelly. And I mentioned him in the video. You should go check him out. His work is amazing, and playing that stuff on a 12-string is incredible. So Pete there were guitars at the time, but he wanted to have it tuned down. It was almost a baritone range. I think I heard half step, but I think it was at least a whole step down. And then the first one was built by a guy from Liverpool. The reality is, and somebody in the comments wrote very helpfully, as I encourage everybody to, help me out, that the guitar was built in England, in the UK, near Liverpool, but that guitar folded under the pressures of travel. And I mean, literally just couldn't take it, and the pressures and things. And then he had two subsequent guitars modeled on that first one's aesthetic with the rounded triangular sound hole and stuff, built by a guy named Taylor from down near where Pete Seeger had settled in the Hudson Valley region of New York, upstate there. So that's more. The really interesting thing in the end is actually that eventually Martin copied the copy of the original Francis guitar that was built by Taylor, of course, almost like the Slash 59 Les Paul story. So that's it. Questions rolling in here already. Patrick wants to know if I've ever played a Rick. Yes, I've played Ricks. Have I ever owned one? No, I've never owned one. I think I say in either the intro or the outro to the video that the thing that kept me from owning them is the same reason that I don't own more Gibson Custom Shop guitars. It's a financial. I majored in economics in college, and I understand the financial detriment in place there. And really, Ricks. I mean, if you look at the numbers of the prices of those guitars in the 60s, they were in like the mid 500s. They were really expensive guitars. Thanks, David. No question. Just euros. I like that. That's a good style thing. So let's do the next thing that I didn't do on the list. The next thing would be Rose Morris. So Rose Morris was a distributing company, and they distributed lots of different guitars. When I started the video, there was an image of a Maple Glow Pete Townsend signature guitar. I think it's a current one. I imagine it's a current one because they're doing them again. And that F-hole was spec'd by Rose Morris. They wanted to have a more traditional. They did not like the triangular cat's eye, whatever you want to call that, traditional Rick sound hole. So they did that. The other thing that Rose Morris did that I didn't put in the video because honestly it seemed so confusing to me, I couldn't think of a way to do it, both include it and have it short. Rose Morris, because they had all of these different companies, they renumbered the guitars. So the numbering system at Rickenbacker, I was actually going to joke that if I got it wrong, I'd give everybody a t-shirt. I'm not going to do that. At Rickenbacker, the numbering system was confusing as it was. They applied a whole different set of numbers. So if you're on the chat from the UK, or if you grew up in the UK at that time, you might know these guitars by a completely different number. A 330 might be a 1998. I actually think that's a correct translation. So that was two interesting Rose Morris things that didn't fit. The next thing was the Ricco sound. Ricco sound was their stereo system, and like the stereo systems in the Stereophonic was huge, and in the 60s, and people were trying to monopolize on it in the guitar world, and it kind of in the Rickenbackers was about as successful as it was in the Gibsons. Just didn't work. So Sassy Cat says that Beato just dropped another video. Didn't Beato go live against my stream a couple weeks ago? He's a friend, like 35 years. He's like, oh, were you on a stream? Sorry. Anyway, too funny. So that's the Ricca sound. The next one is double neck Ricks. And this is sort of a coward's answer, but I have to say it's a real answer. I had a whole section in the script about double necks because I just think they are so cool. But there were so few built that there are literally no pictures of the true vintage ones. And they build them in like 10 or 15 guitar batches. So Phil's texting me. Phil, when you text me like this, it takes me away from the stream. Are you telling me this sounds good? Phil's saying the video is so good today. Thanks, Phil. Anyway, so that's my moderator, folks. He's always on these things. I really appreciate Phil. Anyway, so the double neck ricks were built in very small batches, 10 or 15 is my understanding. And the fascinating thing to me is that the double neck ricks, the 4000 series style Rick double necks, were actually built because Mike Rutherford of Genesis was using a double neck. And it's often reported that that double neck that he was playing was a Rick, that it was an early custom Rick, custom shop Rick. The first one that he was playing actually was something that was thrown together by a luthier in England. And the other interesting sort of aside about 12-string Ricks and Genesis, big prog teenage years for me, was that a lot of those guitars they didn't own. Like things on More Fool Me and on Selling Anything by the Pound. Those guitars actually were owned by their friend Anthony Phillips, who had more money than those guys did. And Anthony Phillips actually owned a lot of those guitars, which I always thought was the coolest. And then, of course, they did build them for artists. And it seems that the company has never been at a loss for figuring out good ways to put guitars into people's hands. So let's see here. Oh, okay. So I've got two more things. So the other thing that I think is absolutely fascinating is that this story is another example. And I don't think I cover this much in the Gibson videos, where I do it in a way that it goes right by. This is another example of where the company, Rickenbacker, becomes famous long after the founder is gone. This company really took off when F.C. Hall owned it, and he and his family since, current President John Hall, they're the ones who made this company what it is today and how we know it all, how we know it internationally and stuff. He was gone, the family. And it seems in the video I said Rudolph, and it was Adolf. So I apologize for that. I just must have written it wrong, or it auto-corrected. And the last thing was, I would say that, like a lot of people, and they put this in the chat, people think that because of the bands that played Ricks, people thought it was a British company. I did. I didn't realize they were in Southern California, sort of, all interwoven with Fender's history. I never knew that. And even if you follow like the history of Tom Petty, that didn't help me, because Petty's band, really, as probably you guys know, the Dirty Knobs certainly knows, Petty's band actually went to England and actually kind of had big hits in England, and then came back to the States as a success. I thought that that's why they had Ricks, because there was a British thing. Totally had that wrong. And only this depth of this project's research actually kind of reinforced that for me and made me understand where that is. Oh, the last thing I want to tell, somebody put in the comments that somebody had just watched, somebody, aka me, had just watched Echoes in the Canyon. If you haven't seen it, there is a documentary that was done by Jacob Dylan, Bob Dylan's son, called Echoes in the Canyon. And it really is, to a very great extent, the influence of Rick 12s on the music and all the different bands and the footage and the music, and they do a concert, and the players that are doing it they're just killer. And it's a great movie. And if you enjoyed this, then you should definitely go there and check that out. All right, so that's my 14 minutes of stuff that didn't make it into the video. Let's go do some questions, and we'll roll through the hour on the questions. So the question right in front of me is, SLW59, will there be a separate Rickenbacker bass video? Absolutely. Yeah, the bass video is there. And actually, I left things out of this video because I knew it was going to come back in the bass video. Like, people were really upset that I didn't include the fact that Geddy Lee played a 12 bass, double neck. But that's going to come back. So that's where we are with that. So Rory Lisbon said, did any artist ever play a twangy Rick through his Marshall? I don't know if people using them with Marshalls. So Peter Buck is known for using Vox amps, but he did kind of go to Marshalls along with his Les Paul, but I think that was a combination things. Why did Rickenbacker never make a P-style 4003? I do not know the answer. Maybe somebody in the chat knows that answer. That was Will Narrison asked that question. Phil, I did that question. Unless this is just a lag situation we got going here. Somebody said earlier that they thought the 620s were underrated. I put up in the community post, I put up 2 thumbnails and had you guys all vote. And everybody, I mean, it was overwhelming. It was an avalanche of votes for the 330. I have to tell you, that Tom Petty model 620, 625, that for me, that's it. And it's because of Damn the Torpedoes. To me, that was the wreck to long for. Unless the whole blue thing. If you probably noticed, I used a clip of Mary Chapin Carpenter, and she's playing a Blue Burst 625 custom shop 625 when she was out on tour. I actually saw her on those tours in the 90s. She was a killer band. Duke Levine toured with her at the time. I mean, just an amazing band that she had at that time. She was riding high. So. All right, what other Rick stuff do we want to talk about here? Yeah, Patrick is right. Patrick's saying it's there. Very underrated. Yeah, I actually don't. Somebody, maybe, I'm trying to remember if David Chase Lopez has a 620 12. I wonder if they're heavy. I wonder if much heavier than the hollow bodies. Are there any years considered bad for Ricks, like 70s Fenders, etc.? That's a great question, Matthew. Matthew S. asked that question. That's a really good question. And you know what? I've never read that that's true. What happened at Rickenbacker, unlike all these other companies, is that they would wildly swing the number of employees that they had. And actually, they would go from being big production shops, whether it was, trying to keep up with demand with the 12s or trying to keep up. C. Fleischer, Jim Babchick, and Pat Denizio of the Smithereens played Ricks. Yeah, there you go, through Marshalls. Thank you. Top Chat to answer a question. That's a good citizen. I really appreciate that. Anyway, whether they were exploding and trying to keep up with demand and 6 months behind, they would grow to be like 60, 80 employees, and then they would fall back and be like 9 guys building guitars by hand again. So no, I've never heard that there is a period of time where Ricks are thought of as being poor quality. Oh, this is actually this String G asks Gene, String Gene asks, have you seen a 12 with the adjustable bridge for all 12 strings? Are you talking about that, or are you talking about the convertible where you can make it a 612? This is probably also actually, in a way, probably David Chase Lopez is probably better qualified. He asked most of these than I am. Do you think, David says, do any more videos on minimalism? Yeah, I'm about to do a bunch because I'm going to sell off a bunch of guitars and amps and pedals. So David, I am going to make some of those in the near future. And actually, I'm going to have a big garage sale. A garage sale as in really nice guitars that I've collected over time, but I just don't play enough to warrant keeping them. So let's do some more questions. Oh, Cody Geiser, sorry Cody if I'm mispronouncing your last name, reminds us that bassists played Ricks through Marshalls all the time. Chris Squire, Lemmy Kilmister with Motorhead, of course, played through Marshalls. You guys are having fun without me here. I like that in the chat. James Duckworth. Hey, James. Says, are the Ricks being made today only like the originals, look like the originals, or are they made out of the same materials? My understanding is that, and this is from talking to the image at the beginning, is from Bob Wilcott's store, Wilcott Guitars, he's a good friend. Has been a real resource for me over the last couple of years, is that they're just as good. And honestly, what they're doing is now they're reissuing reissues. So like this Townsend is available again. So that makes sense. Mel O'Brien asks, Rick 12 strings have 6-string necks, making them hard to play. Is that true? The new ones as well. And Ricky nuts are cut too deep and too wide. Yeah. Jason Laughlin told me that Ricks are kind of like Gretches. You find one that you like the sound of, and then you have your luthier put it to the right. There are models that have slightly wider necks of the 12s. The Petties do, and I think the Pete Townsend ones do as well, but they're only an eighth of an inch wider. I can't speak to the nuts. I don't have enough direct experience to speak to that, but that's an interesting point. And David says he does have a 620-12. They're denser at the neck versus the 360. So it sounds like the weight is different, but he says the 660 is lighter. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. And Paul Aspedia, I apologize, says that reminds us that the bodies are smaller, so that makes sense. Yeah, that makes good. Yep. Yeah, Texas Tyler reiterates what I said in the video, that they've never outsourced production, which is kind of incredible. They've never done a less expensive line. And they've never done an import. They've never gone overseas. They've just stayed the size they need to be to keep up with current demand. KB asked, did anyone at Rickenbacker help with my research? No, I actually feel very conflicted sometimes. Well, actually all the time. I feel pretty conflicted about talking to labels, to brands about their short histories before I've written the script and finished the script. So no, I did not reach out to Rickenbacker. I actually had, through a friend of mine, the guy that runs Jazz Guitar Today is a friend, and he actually offered me direct access to Fred Gretsch through Friends of Friends kind of thing. And I was like, well, the videos are a half an hour, and I would never want to feel like, well, honestly, I don't want to know somebody and not like them, or like them a lot and then feel like it influenced the script in any way. I just never would want to do that. Antonin says, do they keep in tune? Well, I mean, I assume he means the 12s, and I think that's the same story, that the old joke about half the time you spend tuning and the other half of the time you spend playing out of tune. Well, it's cool. David Chase Lopez says he's actually sold a ton of gear based on the channel. That's really good. I've actually, because of videos and stuff, I've collected a bunch of gear this year that need to go. Okay, we're going to go in a different direction. Do you have any experience with Squire Classic Vibes? I just bought a 50s Telecaster and love it. So I actually am on a couple of the forums, TGP and the TDPRI. I think I'm old enough to be a TDPRI guy. Yeah, for sure. Anyway, I'm grumpy enough. No, they're not grumpy. They're nice guys. They're very helpful. But the reality is that those guys love. They're shamelessly in love with the less expensive classic vibe guitars. And I'll tell you that I have a Tele that I put together with a Mexican Baja neck, and that's an incredible guitar. Weighs with a deluxe body. It's just, I think I've talked about it here. I've probably rambled on about it before. It's really good. So let's see. Okay, come on, guys. We need some questions here. Let's talk about whatever you want to talk about. What's new? Oh, Pedro Rivera says, would you do a short history on Hamer, Dean, Charvel Jackson? Not my style of music. Actually, it's not always that. And Hamer is on the list. It's another example where John Densig is a friend of a friend, and I could get access to him and I might, just because there's details that would be wonderful. And then Dean, of course, for me with my prog thing, Dean really took off when the guys in Kansas started playing them. And you can say what you want. To me, Kansas will always be that, a prog band with ridiculous chops and the violin, and Kerry Livgren, and those guys were playing Deans, and they actually didn't start out as an endorsed thing. They actually ordered some of the first custom-made Dean guitars, Z's, and then the Cadillac guitars came later. I have to confess that that's always been sort of a dream guitar, a black custom-style Cadillac Dean guitar. So that actually does overlap with my history, though. It's been a long time. It's not like I drag a Cadillac Dean out to a jazz gig. Not that anybody's doing jazz gigs yet. So, Joseph Cole says, could you do an adjacent interview type thing like Rhett does with the sound videos? Rhett actually pretty owned up to the fact that the sound videos were inspired by the short histories doing well, except of course he's gone in a very different direction, and he and I talk about it. Rick and I talk about ideas for the videos all the time. We're always brainstorming, and I'll tell you that in my YouTube course that I'm writing, one of the things that I tell everybody is that you need to build a community. And one of the great things is, like when I reached out to that pedal show guys, there's no competition. Everybody does something differently enough so that you wouldn't have, people are not going to be stepping on each other. So let's see here. Phil is feeding TCM questions about stainless steel frets. You don't need to feed questions to Phil. Phil, you don't need to feed TCM. TCM can keep up with the stream. He's all over it. I'll answer the question anyway. Somebody's asking if anybody's used stainless frets. I have stainless frets on my Strandbergs, and they're very cool. But at the same time, there is a slight difference. There definitely is a difference in tone. So, Clive54 says, love the channel. Thanks, man. Jeff Harper, would you go back? How would you go about picking up an amp? Okay, then the thing jumps. Picking an amp, and I know what you play has an effect, but what basics show you look at? Not sure what you mean. You mean when I'm trying an amp out, let's assume that you're asking when I'm trying an amp out, what do I do? And for me, the thing with amps is that I want to see that it does two jobs now, that it could have enough power to gig, but it also sounds good at home volume, since the vast majority of playing that I do is at home, and probably the vast majority of playing that everyone does is at home. So that's that fine line. That's the hard thing. Ron Z Photography says a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, he owned an Ovation. Any interest in doing a video on those? I too owned an Ovation because the necks were so much like electrics. I think it's a good story. I tend to spend more time on the labels, the brands that are current, because I think people want to be informed about the brands that they're considering buying. So that's where I go. Like obviously, I played Parkers for years. I had a Hohner Steinberger copy, and I know the guy Eric Aceto down in Ithaca who built the original Steinberger prototypes. He still does prototype building for Ned Steinberger. So I had a lot of access, but there's so many to make. And honestly, I'm kind of excited to start doing some more album ones, and maybe even some short histories of artists. So you can start feeding me ideas for that. And you can always email me. I won't, you can't splash your email address around. You can find my email in the About section, but it's just Keith. It's just 5watt world. It's not Keith. It's 5wattworld@gmail.com. So a simple address. Twan's Movies says, I will keep asking for the Hofner bass video until the day it comes out. Love your stuff. Yeah, that's coming. Actually, no, I've been making noise about doing a Beatles one, and I should do that. There's an announcement that Jeff Mackerlane is in the house. He's probably drinking a cup of coffee and really just letting this yammer in the background. Logan Mays. Logan, I don't know if Ovations are currently produced and what form they're currently produced. I actually owned an Ovation 12 and an Ovation 6 in one of their like custom images, custom shop kind of things. There was a cutaway Adamus style, but with a wood top. It was a beautiful guitar. Actually, a good friend of mine still owns it and plays it in church. C. Fleischer wants to know, would you do an in-depth video on Telecaster Deluxes? You know, it's interesting. I did the Tele video. It was my first big short history video, and it's so painful for me to watch. I've actually thought about redoing some about them. J. Trem John asks, how about I should do a short history of Rick Beato? I think Rick is doing the long history of Rick Beato on his own. If you want to see my history, a piece of my history with Rick Beato, go watch my video about taking lessons with Rick. Which my favorite part of that is that I actually still have all the handwritten jazz standards that Jeff did off the top of his head. He would just write them out at the lesson. And the other thing that he and I would do was I would take one of the copies of the real book that I had, and I said, Rick, do you know this tune? No. And I would show him the book, and I'd close it, and he would read the changes back to me. He's like a circus monkey, Rick, when it comes to that kind of jazz stuff. Patrick Nicoli says, how about the Japanese lawsuit and the 70s era Ibanez, Univox, Carlo Robelli? I've looked around at stuff. There just isn't a ton of information. And to be honest, it's if somebody like Dave Hunter or Tony Bacon or Smith, if one of the big historians hasn't done the digging, like probably 15 or 20 years ago, where they would still have access to interview McCarty or interview the guys who had been, at Rickenbacker in the 60s. That's to me, that's the gold. So those are hard to do. Back on the Rick thing, Mr. Hall calls you up and says, we'll make a signature guitar. What body, pickups, finished, etc. would you choose? That's a great question. Juju UK 68 OK. That's a good question. I'd be asking for a Blue Burst Tom Petty. I'd be pretty happy. Ivan Romanko. Which pedals do you plan on making short histories about? Plan on doing the Rat, Fuzzface, of course, History of the Wah. I have a list in my phone. I have the list in my phone. Let me see if I can find it real quickly here. The list. Possible SH. I've shared this actually before with some. I share it actually periodically with the guys in Friends of 5 Watt and get input from that crowd. Yeah, it's buried. I got too many notes, too many other ideas burying it. But those are the ones that pop into my head right away. Those are the pedals that I'm thinking of doing. If you have an idea for one that you couldn't live without, then you should definitely email me and make your case. Thurston says, could you share your opinion on current 2021 Gibson guitars for jazz, best quality versus price ratio? Love your channel. I don't have enough experience with what is in this year's Gibson group. I actually was thinking, and Beato had sort of goaded me into going to NAMM like a year and a half ago. He said, well, when you break 100,000, then you'll have to go to NAMM. I'm like, I hate conferences. I did that forever. But I'd have gone to NAMM just to, frankly, to be able to get in the room with some of my favorite other YouTubers and other people from the industry that I really like, the guys from Rev and stuff like that. But I haven't had a chance to do the Gibson thing. If I go to Nashville, I'll probably meet Rick there and, get with Cesar and that kind of stuff. For me, the idea of a jazz guitar, unless you're specifically talking about a big hollow body, a jazz guitar is any guitar you're playing jazz on. So I don't think of it that way, though I do have a full hollow body, my 390. Lee Grant said, love the Beano video. Have you thought about doing a video on Boston's debut album? Maybe a collaboration with Rick B. Rick has the original tracks, but also those videos tend to get... Rick can afford to have a video demonetized. Me, much less so. Of course, that was a huge record for me because I got out of high school in 1978. So that's a good one. I'll look and see if that's on the list. The one that's high on my list right now is ZZ Top's third record, Tres Hombres. That's high on my list. And of course, you've heard me say here, I'm going to do that one after I'm working on Who's Next, which is, the Dr. Z Master back there is still here. Although, anyway, I'm working on that. I might not do the playing for that. I might actually bring in a ringer, which would be just like me. Ron Z Photography says, history of the Wah. I still have my original Crybaby. I'll assume when you do the history, you'll mention the Crybaby. I will. I'll even mention yours, Ron. Actually, speaking of which, if you were here 2 weeks ago, you probably heard me talking about the fact that I'm going to do a short history of the Blackguard, kind of like the Burst video, along with my fascination of things that have gotten so expensive and are so kind of unique and rare. I talked about the Blackguard book. I got an email from a guy on the West Coast, and he said, if you're going to do a Blackguard video, you really should play a Nacho caster. You should play one of Nacho's, the guy that wrote the Blackguard book. You should play one of Nacho's guitars. And I wrote back, yeah, I'd be glad to do that. How could we work that out? He immediately wrote back and he said, I'd be glad to sponsor that project. I'll mail you mine. I'll mail you my Nacho caster. And I got the shipping information Saturday. So I have an $8,000 Nacho caster winging its way towards me as we speak. I'm probably going to be here tomorrow. So no pressure at all. I'm going to have Jeff come up from the city to do the playing. Paul Asbia says, did Jeff use a compressor? Well, that was Jason playing the 12-string. And is it strung with titanium flats? TI flats? Oh, Thomas Dick Enfield maybe flats? That's interesting. You should go over to Jason's channel and ask him both those questions. I think he would have told me if he was using a compressor, but at the same time, that is the classic sound. When you think of the Birds and stuff, that's studio compression. Twan's Movie says, do you think physical guitar stores will have a future? I'm assuming they'll be bought up by big chains. No more local charming shops. I thought that would be true 20 years ago, and it's not true. I think it's the level of people know you, and I think we've all had the experience of going into a Guitar Center and knowing more than the guy that was waiting on us. And that's always a disappointment. And I have that less so. I actually took my my new Rosewood board Strat up to Northfield Music, which is the store where Beato took lessons in high school in Pittsford, New York, because I'm close to there again the other day. And there's nothing like being in a store where people know you and have known you for a long time, because I went there when I was in college. I mean, Joe doesn't remember me from when I was a little dirtbag in there, trying to play the expensive guitars when I was in college. But I was just like, hey, you're the little dirtbag trying to do that then. Dustin Gamble says, short history of Guild. Yep, Guild is on the list. Iggy Tom, he's apologizing. He says it's late. He's late. It's okay, man. Just come as you are as it goes. I think I answered this already. Jason, I don't know if Jason did, but we maybe if Jason's not here. Jason's crazy busy. I think he's doing some studio work because I had to make an appointment to talk with him tomorrow. So the person's online channel is called Private. I love that. Who's more famous, Brian Wampler or Carl Martin? I think that it would depend on the continent. I would say that they're equally famous on their own respective continents. Carl Martin being in Europe, of course. Rose says, hey, 5 Watt. What's your thoughts on baritone and bass 6 guitars? I love Barry guitars. They're just, with my sort of, leased gear, I don't use them enough. People that have them and play them. Jason has a double neck Dano that he has. Actually, I think it's a Jerry Jones. I know it is. That has a Barry neck on it, and it sounds amazing. My friend Zach Childs did a really interesting video, I think, about a Squire bass 6. And I have a lot of requests to do a video on the bass 6 history. But I have to tell you that Zach's video is really good. And I haven't felt overwhelmed to have to do it. Scott Baker says, how about a series on the gear, guitars, and amps used by the old blues, country, and jazz guys like John Lee Hooker, Muddy Waters, B.B. King, Chet Atkins? You mean do a series on setups of those guys? I'm not sure the information is out there, and the guys are not so much out there anymore. Scott Bogfoot. Hey, man. Good to see you from Newfoundland. Eduardo0796 says, just enjoys the videos from Santo Domingo, Dominican. Thanks, man. Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, Harmony is one of these resurrected brands. I don't know who it is that owns them. I know my buddy Phil Jones is actually doing some work for them. I don't know if it's design. Phil Jones from the Custom Shop. You might remember him from the Les Paul. No, from the Carina videos, the V and the Explorer video. So, Steve Fraser says, do you like the stainless steel frets? I like them on that guitar. On those guitars, there's an additional bit of definition. I use these rounded picks. Somebody asked me recently if it was still in my pocket. So I use these rounded. There's 3 rounded corners. It's like using the shoulder of a regular pick, and this is an extra heavy. That's a Blue Chip 60. So since I use this pick, I get kind of a round tone, and to have that additional attack from the stainless is a nice combination. And I use that. Maybe I'll stick it up a little video clip of it. I got to sit in with my old jazz band when I first moved back to New York a couple years ago, and I'm playing my Strandberg with the mini humbucker in the neck, and it sounds great through a solid state amp. Total jazz moment. Twan's movie says it would be cool to see a video on a current brand, like a history video on like Harley Benton. It would be interesting, actually. It's kind of like when Josh Scott did the video on Behringer, and that video did so well because everybody wants to know the history, and it's an interesting history. So Rory Lisbon says, ever hear of the Guitars of Fire store in the 70s? Used to go there as a kid and look at everything vintage. The owner wouldn't let me touch the gull tops. I don't know those stores. You have to tell us where it was. Shine Dog says he's enjoying the live streams. Good, because live streams are like doing live presentations. They really make me nervous. This pick actually says, this one that's in my pocket says Keith Williams on it. It's the one from the video. The one in my pocket today actually says, you're not going to be able to read it. It says 5 Watt World. on it, which is the backup. I have the backup pick in my pocket today because that's what I grabbed off the nightstand. Okay, questions here, guys. Oh, Patrick tells us that there's actually a video about John Hall did about Lemmy's reproduction and how they did it. I'll have to go check that out. I didn't see that. Oh, the pick reminds us that the connection between Harmony and Heritage is that they're both now owned by Band Labs. Yeah. And there's actually quite a lot of changes going on at Heritage. And Heritage is a fascinating story in themselves because, of course, it was guys that were still in Kalamazoo. Scott Bogfoot asks, do I know any stories about Matt Guitar Murphy or any of the other Blues Brothers? You know, those guys, they don't call me. They don't call me to hang out. No, I don't. I actually rewatched that movie with my son, and he just thought it was too much fun. Of course, that's exactly what it was intended to be. Joe Bob Billy says he offered Beato a free guitar, custom built, quarter sawn Honduran 10 flame top. Didn't return his email. He's going to give it to me. Sweet. We should talk. Email me. Rick, I'm trying to remember. Rick reads his comments. He scans all his comments. I'm going to defend him because he's a really old friend. But the reality is he's really never read his emails. His channel kind of exploded with those perfect pitch videos, and he never got to ramp up like I am. You know, this sort of really steady. I get about 100 to 150 new subscribers a day, and only when I put a video out will there be a big jump, you know, a big spike, 600-700, and then falls right back to 100, 150 a day, 100, 150. I have days where it's below that. Joe Bob, you reach out, man. I bet you this is Phil telling me that I've got 15 minutes to go. Alt Grendel. I love Alt Grendel. That's fantastic. I love that. We could talk. Alt Grendel and I could go off and talk about Grendel. Anyway, you're going to cover BC Rich. Yeah, BC Rich was a big part of my childhood. Well, my college years. There was a band that played in the bar where I bartended, the bass player and those guys were going up to the House of Guitars and buying and swapping and stuff, and they were always with these hand-built BC Rich guitars, Mockingbird basses and stuff. It's so cool. So they're on the list. BC Rich actually is on the list, and it became a very different thing later. It would be very interesting. Sound Propeller Patrick says, this episode hits close to home for me. He owns a 66 370 12-string, and he's owned it since the 80s, and a Roger McGuinn. And Roger McGuinn played it and signed the back of the headstock. That is very cool. That's very cool. You should send me a photograph of that. GoGo 151 says, are those PRSs in the background? Those are the only two PRSs I own now. They are unique models. This is a Mira. This was a 2010 Mira. This is a nice burst. Actually, David Barber from Barber Electronics found this for me. At a Guitar Center in, I was looking for a second one of these for a long time. I'm going to leave P90s in this, probably get a pair of throwbacks, and I'm going to put Jim McNelly P90 sized humbucker, PAF style, in the other guitar. It has a 24.5-inch scale, which is a scale that's very close to the original burst. PRS folks I'm not quite big enough for them to be really nice to me. But this is my favorite model. This one's got a little wear on it. It's interesting that it came out of a Guitar Center in Nashville, and it's got some mileage. It probably was an artist guitar. That's the theory. That's Zach Child's theory about this guitar. Real nice piece of mahogany. Really nice. Anyways, those are the PRSs. And I've been playing these because they're kind of my junior, and they sound great. Both of these, talking to the wall. Both of those guitars weigh 6.5 pounds. So, I mean, each, obviously. Kyle Kendrick says, Turn was a 12-string. It absolutely was. Yep. Ivan Romanenko Romanenko. Which video are you most proud of? Huh. That's a great question. Which video am I most proud of? For a long time, my favorite video that I made was one called Creativity Through Limitations. I have this theory, and I'll share it here. How much time have I got, Phil? That the videos that we make that we like the most, the ones that really get us worked up, are probably videos we should just make for ourselves, because we're probably making a video that matters the most to us and really haven't thought about the audience as much. So that's one of the ones. Somebody just asked, it went by in the stream, if I like the new 68 Champ. The new 68 Champ, I'm not going to be able to get out of the way. The new 68 Champ is right down there. I got it about 2 weeks ago, and I've been working on short histories flat out, and I will admit that I have not yet plugged it in. So I'm probably going to do it. Maybe I'll play it on a live stream, and maybe if it depends on how excited I am about it, will depend on whether I end up doing a video. Yeah, Steve Moore was asking me the same thing. Steve, no thoughts yet. The only thoughts I have, Steve, is that they sent me one, and I didn't even know it was coming. And Steve Taylor from Fender said, "How could I not send 5-Watt World one?" They sent a lot of them out. They sent a lot of guitars out. I mean, a lot of those amps out. So I hadn't seen you in the stream there before that, Steve. That's good. You're here. Rose says, "Did Squire build the first electric baritones?" Huh. No. The first electric baritone 6-string guitars probably were Danelectros. The first 6-string bass guitars were probably Danelectros, and somebody in the stream can correct me if I got that wrong. Graham Biley says, "What's your favorite guitar-related YouTube video by any other YouTuber?" Whew, man. I'm going to throw Sean a bone here, because there is a video. So Sean Tubbs is one of my favorite people, and I don't even know him that well. I've talked to him on the phone a couple of times. He works with REVERB now, and he does a lot of stuff. And Sean used to do product demos. And the thing that I always tell Sean that he does so well is he would write things to demo things. And you could see that it's probably not profitable in the least. He did a demo of a Rocket Echo. The Alien Echo. Go look it up. He did a video call on the Alien Echo, and he did this chord progression, and I think it's got either a borrowed chord, borrowed from the minor, or a minor 4 chord or something. It's stuck in my head. I probably have gone back and watched that video a dozen times, and the first time I got to talk to him on the phone, I went a little fanboy and I told him so. I'm like, that video is killer. For me, it's when people do things that when things do things that surprise me, and when people can tell a story that's relatable without it being completely about them. I think that's the hardest thing to do, is to do a video that matters to you, but also in a way can matter to others. Andy Bungart saying he saw 5-Watt Coffee mentioned in another video. Yeah, I should have actually put up a picture of those guys. They reached out. And I actually haven't talked to them since they closed down a bunch of stores for COVID, and I hope they got back into it. Okay, so what did I miss, guys? What questions got by me? It's 4:49 here. Yeah, the Danelectro Tic Tac bass was a baritone. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Leland Berg's right, and I think that I have that right. That's the first 6-string basses that Nate Daniel was way ahead of its time. Yeah, the Patrick Neglucci says he has an Alien Echo. It lets you modify. I don't have one, but it let you tweak the amount of modulation, and it gave you a tone control for the background. I think it was before its time. J. Scott Klossner, what do you think about the theory that Ricks sound best with half rounds versus round wound guitars, strings, guitars, and basses? Well, that's interesting. So I don't know if anybody has tried these. I have an EJ Strat, and when I bought my EJ Strat, I went full EJ, and I started using his GHS half round strings. And I think that probably he used to use those. I think he uses actually NYXLs now. So the half round strings, I put those on that Strat. I really like them. They have a little more tension maybe because they're half rounds. They supposedly have a thicker core. That's what's on those. Those guitars have a pretty short scale, 24.5 inches, and that's what's on those too. And I actually have those on the red Strandberg. So that's what that is. Kyle Kandrick says, "What am I working on now, TrueFire wise? Oh, what am I working on? Am I playing right now? Actually, I'm not working on. Well, I am. I'm working on Jeff's playing over changes course because I don't really have playing over changes in a rock context, and I'm finding that working on those kinds of changes actually is just really better. It's forcing me to work on my arpeggios more, but really my triad arpeggios, so core. And I'm not great. I'll admit this freely here. I'm not great at fretboard theory or theory in general because I'm dyslexic. So I have to really stick to the intervals and things that make me work on the intervals. I'm actually using Tom Coyle's solo program to work on learning the fretboard better. I'm working on that now. And I got a text from Phil. He's probably telling me I'm almost out of time. Yeah, I'm almost out of time. Iggy Tommy says, am I going to do Epiphone thin lines, the Rivera Casino Sheridans? I am. That's actually on the list. Ivan says, which neck profiles do I like most? Am I picky? I am kind of picky. I played DGTs for a long time. They were the guitars that I played after the big purge, and I played those for 6 or 7 years, maybe 8 years. I love the neck. That pattern neck from 2010, and they use the word pattern at PRS over and over and over again, and they modify the neck, so it's really confusing. Although they do have a web page with the measurements, it's not that helpful to me. You gotta feel them. The neck on my R9 is almost exactly the same as the neck on those two guitars. It's full. I really like the soft V of the Eric Johnson necks. So it's sort of beefy, but not a 58 size neck, and not a Blackguard neck. Yeshua Simmons says, are we going to get a Music Man short history, specifically Stingray Cutlass? Yeah, I would have to. I imagine it would have to be built on the Stingray. Yeah. Alex, I'm laughing because Alex Derlagos has got a big Steinbergers. I assume we're requesting a Steinberger short history. Alex, I touched on that a little earlier. I loved them, although I thought they were heavy. The Strat style ones, but they were very cool. Anton says, am I picky about when it comes to picks? Is going to sound like just a whole all-in big endorsement, and I guess it kind of is. I didn't used to be. Well, I was. I used to use a specific color Perloid Diodario pick, and then I got my first blue chip pick for Christmas from my son, and that was the end. I play with they play what they call their big jazz. They did one for me with a rounded tip like I like, and that's what I used in the lighter gauges. They only go down to about heavies, and then I use this. Okay. Somebody asked earlier what I was working on. I think I said earlier I'm working on a short history of the Les Paul Jr. I actually think I finished the script draft today, so I'll do my process is I draft the script, see where I am as far as how long it is and whether it's going to come in under my 30-minute time limit. And sometimes I have to leave stuff on the floor, like with the Rickenbacker video I had to cut after I filmed, which is takes a lot of extra time. And then I do a single read through edit, and then I do an aloud edit where I say it aloud and edit it. And since they're so long, I can't do that. And the same day as I film, and then I film the next day. SRV3 Fender says, what makes the blue chip so special? The material is just that little bit better. It feels different on the strings, and it stays in my fingers. I have pretty dry hands. It stays in my fingers. So I think that's really what that is. I think Phil's telling me I'm out of time, but my computer tells me it's 4:55. 1 minute. I got 4:55, Phil. Stay with me. Why a 30-minute time limit? It's brutal. to make a video longer than that, to be perfectly honest. And all the Les Paul video that I made, History of the Les Paul, is Nick Danger asking that question, is 39 minutes. It takes on average about between 45 minutes and an hour to make 1 minute of video. So if I make a 30-minute video, it takes me 30 hours of editing and building, which is why these videos run every 2 days. So, Mason is asking, hey Mason, what's the timeline for producing an episode? How much time from start to finish? It's 2 weeks, almost always 2 full weeks. It takes me a week. I do research of different things along the way, and then I write for 4 or 5 days, and then I edit for 3 days, and then I send it to Perry. He almost always improves it and sends it back to me. No, sorry, he always improves it. He almost always gets involved. He doesn't. He actually has a real life, and he does this for free on the side as a favor to the channel. So anyway, so that's what it was. So I guess we are running out of time. Phil's right. Mason knows how to reach me, so we can talk more about that if he wants to sometime. Okay, so thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate it. And as nervous as I might get at these things and yammer on quickly, I appreciate everybody coming, and I appreciate everybody being interested and listening. Again, thanks for